But I can
There,
tell you that there's a very specific theory that's been put out there that will lead to Orion the Hunter in the New Orleans painting. So I just look for combinations like that. Like this is possibly confirming that
yeah,
because I found 10 instances of this word being important.
yeah. Okay.
That's
There. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, that's kind of all you can do with the puzzle, right? You gotta like shake it and see how many of X do you have in the X bucket, how many of Y do you have in the Y bucket, and then do they overlap? And if you have all these disparate things that at some point start to overlap, then that's probably as close as confirmation as we're gonna get with this thing.
It goes back to the whole framework, right? Since we don't have a framework, anything's possible. You get hunts like Masquerade, where it's 20 or whatever pages long, and it's very clear what's part of the puzzle and what's not, and it's easy to work on. Then you get stuff like Whistle Pig or The Secret. It's 250 pages long. You have no idea what's part of a puzzle and what's part of a book. I mean, a book's got to reference shit. A book's got to have a story. Not everything in that story is going to be a clue. What's a clue? What's not? It makes it almost impossible.
But I can tell you just from reading it, when there's references to like reading between the lines, and there's references to man not believing in fairies.
Yeah.
And like I talked to you at the beginning about like this mythology that they created, there's references to Tinkerbell and Peter Pan and the author. There's references in the Bugbear to him being upset because they cut down so many trees to write about stories that had nothing to do with them believing in fairies. Like that's why he left. So
Yeah.
like I see things over and over again, like these concepts. Use your imagination is another concept that is littered throughout the references in the book. So if you're not using your imagination, if you're thinking like total, like the wrong side of your brain, right? Left brain, right brain. Like if you're on the logic side, you're not using any imagination and creativity. Like I think you're like, you got to be at least 50-50. You got to go down the middle somewhere,
I don't disagree. I just like Chris is saying, you've got to shake the tree to see what falls out, right? You've got to, when you have this much information, you almost have to follow all of the information just to see if it leads somewhere. It's a tedious process. Speaking of tedious processes, did you say you have a list of the changes from the manuscript to the book? And if so, would you be willing to share that with people? That would make a lot of work much easier.
I mean, I went through, it's about 12 pages. And I mean, I can make a PDF out of this. Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's just going to be like really short,
Yeah, just
truncated
words.
thoughts, like,
Yeah.
hey, they changed this, that, or whatever, So, I mean, it's not going to be anything too groundbreaking. I think it would be a starting point for
Well,
somebody as they were working their way through the manuscript to look and say like, okay, he changed this section. And then what did he change it from? What did he change it to? Why did they remove this? Like this, like if a section was removed that was just very bland and didn't contain anything, and then all of a sudden they rewrote it, and all of a sudden there's these very specific references. Like I would be like, man, I'm going to research those. Like that could be super important. And then on the same hand, like he could have taken stuff out that looked very specific and replaced it with something. And you're like, well, why did he do that? Like, was that an idea that didn't work? And I don't know, but it would at least be a place for people to start.
The reason I was asking was on 12 Treasures, there's two ideas that we had, both for the new wiki that Chris and I and everybody's working on, and for 12 Treasures. On 12 Treasures, I wanted to put the pages of the manuscript with the pages of the actual book, and then list what changed between the two. And we wanted to do the same on the wiki, and that would just make the job 1,000 times easier if we could look, where to have an idea of where to look at a glance.
Yeah, some of the things I wrote were kind of general, right? Like he did a bunch of general edits on this page. And so I don't go into specifics because it's kind of obvious that he was just cleaning up either poor writing or wanted to express the idea a different way, whatever. But then there's other things where it's like, man, they obviously wrote this section that's in the book later, and it must have been really important for them to put it in there. Like why were these specific references put in there.
Mhm.
Those are the kind of things that really intrigue me.
I keep getting messages about drama. Apparently there's drama going on somewhere. Fun. Always
In the
drama.
comments or
No,
in
somewhere else. In general, it's always drama.
always drama?
Maybe you should have like a siren go off or something, you know, like
Every time there's
But never turn
drama,
off.
my life, yeah.
just like a
Phil-
breaking drama.
Phil Abbott popped in and said, "Holy shit, it's Carly in the flesh."
I'm here, man.
Does he get Phil to come in? Screw it.
Like I'll give an example of something that was removed that just caught my eye. So it mentions Mab is the fairy queen, right? And it mentions her like in the passage to the New World. But it also in the manuscript, it mentioned Oberon and Titania, which those are the fairy king and queen as well, but they were given different names at different times. So like Shakespeare in A Midsummer Night's Dream has Titania and Oberon as the fairy king and queen. But then in Romeo and Juliet, it's Queen Mab. And so it's a redundancy to list them all in the manuscript because it's maybe he felt like I'm jumbling the waters too much, or I'm maybe giving too much away, like with multiple references that could lead back to Shakespeare, for example. Maybe he felt like he was giving too much away. So he pulled the Oberon and Titania references. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
just went with the Queen Mab.
Yeah, that's interesting because I always took that reference to be Edmund Spenser, but I wouldn't, I didn't take it to Shakespeare. But now hearing you say that, I was like, maybe he was trying to hide the overt Shakespeare-ness. And maybe I've been looking down the wrong literary reference.
Well, and Spenser is mentioned as well. Like whatever Spenser was mentioned, it got removed as well. So that begs the question: was it removed because they were hiding Spenser? Are we supposed to focus on Shakespeare? I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't know. These are questions that I don't have the answer to. You know.
I like this. We're bringing people together.
Where's the Spenser? Let me find the Spenser reference. What he did. Okay, so that was on. So if you're following along at home, page 20, and that was part of the filthy Hobbit, right? So he changed the entire history on that ferry. Like if you go through and look at it, like the entire history was swapped out. And so part of that was the mention of Edmund Spenser, and he had the epic poem that you're referring to, right? The Fairy Queen.
Yeah, the fairy queen.
And the thought is that Elizabeth I, it was an allegory for her, right? It's referencing her, and there's this whole tie-in with Sir Walter Raleigh, who was sent by her. That was the establishment of the Lost Colony and all the history that goes along with that. So, like, did he feel like he was giving too much away by removing that reference? Like he was like, man, I got to hide that because that's almost a direct connection in the field guide to take you to the Lost Colony.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It was something that I was talking about before because we were talking about that anniversary hunt that me and Arthur did, right? It's coming out in like a week. And I was saying that Arthur didn't know how I did anything in the verse, and I didn't know how Arthur did anything in the painting. And like I looked at his painting and I can't figure anything out. And I was saying, because you're so segmented like that, you tend to think to yourself when you're making part of a puzzle, what if this other person that's making this other part puts in an error and makes something too easy? And therefore, if he does that, I have to make my part even more obscure. Right. And I wonder if instead of being a bad puzzle, that's where a lot of the difficulty comes in from The Secret. With Byron and John and Sean and Ted and Joel and Ben, with them all working remotely without email or without internet. All they can do is have phone calls and send faxes of Polaroids or whatever. if Byron would think maybe John's going to do something over here that's going to screw up and make things too easy, so I'm going to make my puzzle harder. Where at the same time, John's thinking maybe Byron's going to do something over here that's going to make it too easy, so I'm going to make my puzzle harder, and it just gets infinitely more hard. It gets it gets harder by being more obscure, right? Kind of like what you guys were talking about.
Yeah.
We know the literary references are obscure.
Yeah, very obscure
Yeah.
for the most part.
Some of them so obscure that like I even question that I'm like seeing it. Like
Yeah, like
the
cold as
last of the
glass.
Mohicans one.
Well, like cold as glass is, you could use that phrase for anything. Like, is it actually a reference? Is it not? Probably is, but
I had a
You have to
breakthrough
be
on
either
that.
really well read,
yeah,
or you have to be from the future and have the internet,
Google.
right?
Okay, so like I have thoughts specifically on that because I've had that same question before a lot. And okay, Carly, I know you're really into the Houston verse.
Can I ask this real? I've always assumed that was from Atlas Shrugged. Is it from Anthem?
No, it's from Anthem.
From Anthem.
Okay. They're both basically the same book.
I
On a
mean,
philosophical level.
Ayn Rand's entire series is all trash, so they're all the same because they're all
Just
trash.
be dicks to each other and everything will be fine.
No, but I was. Do you want to talk about that specific reference? Because
Sure.
I have thoughts. So, I've been going down this like Americana thing with The Secret. I think I talked about it in one of the last times we talked, like references to the Pledge of Allegiance and finding other like of these like specifically like Americana references.
Right.
So one thing that I was playing with was trying to figure out in the Houston verse, like how the hell would you find that reference if you weren't if you weren't totally familiar with the book, like you're never really going to get there. I have to bring up my post because I'm gonna butcher this because I made a blog post about this at some not too far away time.
You guys are still making vlogs? I haven't checked that website in forever.
We off and on, you go through phases.
Is it still thesecretofthesecret.com?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So sort of taking those first 6 lines together, right? Like Fortress North, cold as glass, friendship south, take your task to the number 982, right? So like, let's say that those 6 lines are a direction that are like an instruction, I should say instruction, that are telling you how to get to something called the number 982, whatever that may be. So bridging a lot of text. Those 2 words at the beginning, Fortress North, you kind of like come into that. No, there's like no context, but with this sort of like Americana freedom, liberty vibe in front, thinking to somehow that got me thinking of the stars. I was thinking of the Star Spangled Banner, right? Like I have this land of the free and the home of the brave, like in my mind. And I looked it up, and the Star Spangled Banner used to be, or was originally titled The Defense of Fort Henry, which is like some fort in Baltimore that it was like important in the, I don't know, y'all are the Americans, you know your history, I assume.
We were also educated in America. I don't know if you're aware.
So the thing about if Fortress North, if we can say for a second that Fortress North is this important American fort in Baltimore, that the Star Spangled Banner is named after. Star Spangled Banner is also the national anthem. So would that get you from this fort to the national anthem, which is the word anthem, the book anthem?
That was a lot of big steps.
I know. But
Well, I mean,
getting to the book anthem can get you to Cold as Glass, which we know is a passage about trains, right? So like if we're talking about these like continual steps, these are huge leaps, I should say, but if you can go from one to the next to the you've all of a sudden gotten your way to train, does that then take you the next step to say like the number 982 thing is a train?
Yeah. See, my way of thinking of it doesn't help you at all. It doesn't help you in the least. I look at it the same as I look at the quote in the New Orleans verse. That quote is obscure, but if you know it, you all of a sudden know what city you're supposed to be in, right? The half of the puzzle is completely taken away from you. And in the same way in Houston, unless you know all of the information we know now, 982 is one of the hardest lines in this. I mean, it can only apply to one specific thing, which is not historical, and you will not know about it unless you're standing in front of it. And Cold as Glass could help you know what that is if you know the reference. And if you don't know the reference, you're just kind of screwed.
But you'd already have to know Houston. So like the question there would be like, did we solve the painting and get Houston out of it? Or is Friendship South itself just a reference to Texas's motto? Like, does Cold as Glass get you train? Friendship South tells you Texas. So the number 982 is a train in Texas, and the painting gives you Houston, and you interlock it all together.
You know what I would love to do one day is to get three people with alternating opinions, somebody like Carly and Chris, together and just pick a city and just be like, get me somewhere from the very beginning. Forget everything you know. Forget latitude and longitude coordinates. Forget the fact that we know this city. Use this book to get me there, right? I mean, you could use latitude and longitude coordinates if you want. They're pretty integral. But but I feel like it'd be a fun exercise to go through all the shit that people see that, number one, get us to a city, but then break down how to get to that specific part, to sort of go over what we take for granted, you know, and see if we can find different ways to interpret it. Maybe that's how we can hit on something we've missed. I don't know.
Spend a lot of time trying to like leave the assumptions at the door and like look at it fresh. It's hard.
Yeah, you can't. You almost can't.
I tried doing that with the I put up a litany page on the wiki, and I was like, okay, I'm going to look at this puzzle not knowing anything. What's the first thing that I see? It's like, this is each hunt is about a jewel. We often refer to each hunt by a city, or we refer to each hunt by a month. But those are not the first things you're presented with. If you come to this book sight unseen, the first thing you're presented with is the hunt for the pearl, right? It's like you're looking for 12 treasures. What are the treasures? Pearl, diamond, garnet, like whatever. Like those are the things, right? That was like one sort of mind shift change that I had from referring to the paintings by the month, like thinking of the painting and the verse pair as this is for the pearl. And how does that change my thinking about, you know, how the painting or the verse can be interpreted?
Yeah, but even then, even when you're trying to forget everything, you still know the goal. You still know where you want to get. Like, there's always something that's going to skew your logic. There's always something that's going to skew your research, or, you know, the rabbit holes that you go down, because you at least know where you want to end up in a general sense. So yeah, I don't know. You end up being like the people who are like, it's in Paducah because here's an outline of the thing, because you're working, you know, you're working backwards. It's impossible to forget everything that you know.
Chris, you'll need to go back and watch the beginning, because I did talk about those same exact 6 lines in the Houston verse. So you can maybe let me know how you think about what I said, because I do kind of touch along the same sort of lines of like, maybe these are instructions. I kind of think it might be a template, but I go into the Cold as Glass, Ayn Rand anthem deeper than most people. Like, I'm just not going to be surface level and think about it like, yeah, it's describing a tunnel with a train track in it. I'm going to go further. I'm going to say, like, what was the most important theme that came from this book, and them finding the letter I again, right? It's about individualism, and it's this small word that was removed, and everybody was given a number. And so the letter I, to me, is like super important. The column in the painting looks like a capital, or it looks like a lowercase I. The fountain that was posted the other day, that's the location that I'm generally at. It looks like an I, like a lowercase I. It's an upside down exclamation point, which is at the end of the line. There's the spout. And I talked about how, like, you could maybe flip the image. Well, what if you flip the exclamation point upside down? Other things that I've thought about with that is, anthem would be basically telling you it's a flag. Like, there needs to be a flag somewhere that you're using to tie in. There are ones at Tranquility that I believe are relevant, so and even going, I mean, you can get pretty deep when you start really diving into the themes of some of these literary references. Like, even Ayn Rand, she wrote Anthem, but it didn't get published first. She wrote The Fountainhead, and then The Fountainhead got published, which then led to her getting Anthem published. So is The Fountain then relevant? The Fountainhead? Because I kind of think The Fountainhead there is relevant. So, it all, to me, like, it's this path that you go down, and I don't stop superficially. I tend to dive pretty deep.
I just keep thinking of how much I like Ayn Rand's books, except for the message. Like, Anthem was such a good book, man. It had, like, except for the part where you have to be an asshole to everybody else.
Yeah, no, Objectivism is not for me.
No.
I'm not going to speak highly of that. But I do, the one thing that initially jumped out at me is the flag. And, like, I kind of, like, I'm finding these, like, flaggy references in more than one verse. Like, we all, the San Francisco verse, the injustice for all, like, he's tweaked it, but he's clearly getting us in the mindset of the one that you say about the flag. What's it called?
The national anthem?
No, it's the other
Pledge
one.
of Allegiance.
The Pledge of Allegiance, that one, right? With liberty and justice for all. But he changed liberty to education.
Yeah.
In truth be free, but he's still getting you in that mindset, right? Like, there's something about flags, or the flag, or specifically the United States flag, that he wouldn't be using those words in that way if it wasn't important.
Do you think there's a piece of the flag in the Houston painting hidden up in the leaves? Have you ever thought that?
No, I haven't. I've never.
I mean, there's a small section that to me looks like just the bars of the American flag. It's super small. It's not like something that would stand out.
Where at in the painting? I'm curious.
It's hidden in the leaves, so it'd be kind of up to the right, I believe, kind of near where the 30 is, I think, if I remember right.
It's where it has the sort of lines going across like a void. Is that what you're talking about?
Kind of horizontal, maybe 3 or 4 together.
Yeah.
It might not be even straight across. It might be more like angled.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I looked at it, but
yeah, no, I as soon as you described it, I was like, oh, that part. Okay. Yeah. All right.